Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for the Roosevelt University Young Professional Association Working Lunch Series. My name is Jessica Mueller. I am the Associate Director of Alumni Engagement, and I'm so pleased that you've joined us today to continue building your professional and personal development. The Young Professionals Association is a premier networking group comprised of recent graduates across all industries, and we're offering opportunities to make meaningful connections to our graduates by having you all participate in social events, programs, and other activities like today's events. And I wanted to let you know that today's session will be recorded. Please utilize the reactions for your feedback today and the chat window for questions. You can put them in the chat box. I'll be monitoring, and we'll ask them if they're applicable to the conversation for expansion on a point. If not, we can also follow up at the end with questions or comments. But I want to say a big thank you to our speakers today, and as well as our association's co-chair, Dina, who will be introing the session, and our presenters. But thank you in advance. I am really looking forward to this topic, and I appreciate your time and energy to be here with us today. So Dina, after you. Oh, excuse me. Let me intro Dina. Dina Matawi is a senior HR generalist at Perker Elmer Incorporated, and has experience with performance, talent management, data analytics, leadership, and engagement strategy. She serves as an alumni mentor by coaching and guiding students to support their professional growth. And Dina also holds a BS in psychology from Northeastern Illinois University, and an MBA or an MA in human resources from Roosevelt. So thank you so much for being here. Let me turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. As Jessica said, my name is Dina Matawi. I am one of the co-chairs for the Young Professional Association. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us today. I'm going to go off camera for a quick second while I intro our two amazing speakers today. And I do want to take a quick step and say, as young professionals, we have been in unprecedented year. We have been returning to the workplace, or returning to being somewhat normal in the age of COVID and social distancing. So it can be hard on all of us, and not just thyself. I want all of us to just take a moment and understand that a simple thank you to each and every one of us can go a great way. So thank you for everything that you have been doing. Thank you for your continuous help and support in making those events successful and participating with us. Today, we're going to hear from two recent alumni. They're going to share their experience with us as job seekers, and how they have used their social media channels and podcast bias check-in to craft their professional presence online and offline during this presentation today on achieving professional visibility through content creation. As we realize the challenges of finding an employment, both for early career industrial organization psychologists and international graduate students, both are recent graduates. Woohoo, congratulations to you both. Susana Gómez Ornelas has a master's in industrial organizational psychology, graduating in 2021, and Claudia Della Pona has an MBA and MA in industrial organizational psychology, graduate in 2020. So I want to welcome you both and say today we're going to talk about how you started your recording of the podcast, Bias Check-In, share your experience with us in the group and with other job seekers on the call or international students in the IO field. And since you've hit record for the first time in the summer of 2020, you have been invited to participate today, and also participate in the SIOP for 2021, which is the National Conference of Industrial Organizational Psychology. Here, the panelists with us as well. And then both serve as a principal consultant for the Lindsay Group Co. It's an organizational development consulting firm based in Washington, D.C., and focusing on the anti-racist strategy planning and execution. Susana has been a content creator behind @work_psych, which is an online community where she shares knowledge about healthy workplace and organizational psychology. And Claudia will be serving as an associate professor of industrial organizational psychology next fall semester at Randolph-Macon College in Ashland, Virginia, her undergraduate alumni mater. So I want to take a moment to say thank you both and for taking the time, and let's get started.
Thank you for the intro.
Thank you, Dina.
So, hi everyone. As you've heard, I'm a recent graduate as in December 2020. And right now we're working in industrial organizational psychology within 6 months to 6 days after graduation. So that's been a very, very lucky scenario for us. But it doesn't mean that it's necessarily been easy. So we hope that sharing about our journey is gonna help you, encourage you, leave you with at least some tidbits that you can take away from today's talk.
Absolutely.
Susie?
Yeah, thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Dina, for having us today. Let's go back a little bit and define what our master's is in, IO psychology. So IO psychology is a scientific study of human behavior in organizations, specifically your workplace. We focus on deriving principles of individual groups and organizational behavior and applying that knowledge to the solutions of problems at work. So at our core, we are scientist practitioners. We have the expertise, design, execution, and interpretation of research, and apply these things to help address human workplace organizational problems, that being identifying training and development needs, formulating training programs, coaching employees, and even coaching ourselves. And now that you know a little about our educational background, we can move forward into our origin story.
So if you are listeners of the podcast, you know we are very big onto origin stories and how they inform what we are and what we become. If not, it's okay. We'll definitely share the podcast at the end of the talk, so don't worry. But the main thing that we like to joke about is that we're both millennials. We're in the heart of it. And that's a very contentious claim among IO psychologists because theoretically, we haven't quite proven generational differences yet. Lived life, however, shows us that we are definitely millennials. A good day is a day in which we only check our phone 250 times and we stay on it less than 3 hours a day. That's a great restful day. But the reason we bring that up is because as a generation, and that definitely applies to the two of us as well, we feel we need to have a purpose at our core. If the generations before, the stereotype is that we work to live and we want to just have the white picket fence house in the suburbs, the sedan, 2 kids and a pet, which is totally fine if that is still the case. We also want to know that our work is meaningful. And that has been somewhat of the red thread behind all the initiatives and the efforts that Susie and I have put together since we started collaborating and even before.
Mm-hmm. So in May 2020, as I was finishing my second to last semester with RU, in the middle of a pandemic, standing in my second economic recession, I knew I had to start a community. So I went to Instagram, as a good millennial would, and start a platform to get connected to other IOs and to build somewhat of a portfolio.
Yes. And then fast forward to summer of 2020, Susie's community is picking up. Other initiatives are starting up and we are interacting with them in the IO world online so that we can connect with people. And then the US Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, throws a little bit of a wrench in our plans. So if you remember at that point, there was talk about how international students, to be in good standing with the US government, would need to take classes in person. A lot of institutions were not offering classes in person at that point. And so we were finding ourselves in this conundrum. Big name institutions came out to legally dispute the case. Harvard, MIT, and the like. And we saw a really good opening for conversations to happen within academia, within our industry, on how do we support the talent that is coming through our students, whether internationals or not. The decision was quickly overruled. And unfortunately, after a couple media cycles, we moved on to the next urgent thing. But that's when Susie and I got together and we decided to create BCI, create a space where we could record our voices, keep these conversations going, but also give our metaphorical and literal megaphones to other voices that we hadn't seen represented in our spaces yet. And so to this day, we
have almost 30 episodes out. We have listeners in over 35 countries. And as of this morning, we have over 1,500 plus streams.
So it's definitely been a rocky road. We haven't gotten there overnight, but it's been very, very satisfactory and encouraging to see the positive reception and the support that there is in the industry once we put ourselves out there.
So the reason for today's talk, or the reason why you're here, achieving professional visibility through content creation. As we just mentioned, I started WorkPsych to gain connections and to create a portfolio. What was I thinking? Well, what are some top of mind brands? Nike, Amazon, Apple, you see them everywhere. Well, it turns out that if you want to be memorable like that, you need to be visible. And so I thought, how can I make myself more visible in the IO community so that when I graduate 6 days ago, I have people that know me and know my work. So I decided to create my personal brand, WorkPsych, and then with Claudia, grow that into Bias Check-in.
So building that brand can be intimidating at first, but it really is just creating visibility for yourself and the work that you're passionate about in your industry, in your professional network, just advocating for the work you do. As we all have limited attention spans, we could be doing something great and amazing, but if no one knows that we're doing something amazing and incredible, then doors will just not open. So the challenge there is to raise your visibility without being a little bit egotistical and just talking about yourself all the time. I think we all have an image that comes to mind when we see like, oh Lord, they're talking about themselves again. How big can an ego be? And of course you don't want to do that. We want to find the balance. So at the same time, it's very easy because right now with everything being online and most interactions being online, we don't have to rely on someone else to give us a platform. We all already have personal platforms, whatever channels may fit best your industry or your interest area. Instagram is becoming a great platform for businesses. Besides the occasional selfie, food, pet picture, nephew, niece portraits, like we can also conduct business, have transactions there, and increase our professional visibility. We have LinkedIn, we have organization-specific platforms. Like Dina mentioned, we were part of SIOP in April, and SIOP also has an internal platform that we've been more visible on, having been panelists. So self-publishing, self-posting is definitely an opportunity. And so the next challenge that poses is like, okay, I know where to post. What on earth am I supposed to say? Mm-hmm. I graduated 5 months ago. I graduated 5 days ago. How am I an expert on anything? And that was somewhat of my roadblock before crossing paths with Susie. But Susie, walk us through that. Like, you decided to do WorkPsych, you have your personal brand. What's your first post? What do you do?
Well, to me, it was, what are the questions that I get asked repeatedly? So my first 2 posts were, what is IO? The definition of what is IO in English and Spanish, because I wanted to create a bilingual community. And then to give myself a little more visibility, I went with what was on everyone's mind. how do I work from home? What are tips and tricks about that? But you know that as well. What was our first episode on?
International students. What else? That is our lived experience that we can share. And we had a lot of research into more of the legal aspects. Neither of us is in law school or pre-law, so we had to still do our due diligence. But we could contribute our very personal lens to an issue that most people in our network and environment were aware of, at least superficially.
Exactly.
And
so, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
It was going to that, like, those give you the clues of what your skills are, where your strengths are at, what are the questions people are already seeking your guidance on. In our cases, like, how do you navigate being an international student? How can professors, how can universities help you? What is IO Psych? Why do we need IO psychologists? How can they help?
What happens in the great big beyond after we walk on stage or after we have our Zoom graduation? And so, as I mentioned, I didn't cross the boundary of like, okay, what can I contribute to the conversation until I crossed paths with Susie. But even before that, we were moving along the same mindset, because when I started in the spring 2020 semester, we were not remote quite yet, but I was facing the same thing. I need an internship in my field to graduate. I need to make connections with people in my field. Our local chapter of our national association was a good place to start, but how do we move beyond that? And I did something that Susie makes fun of me for, because she thinks it's scary, and I thought it was
terrifying,
perfectly normal and fine. But I decided to reverse engineer it. So I started looking at people I looked up to, either alumni of my program or other professors and faculty at other IO institutions. And I started sliding into their DMs like a millennial does, but on LinkedIn and with a little bit more formal language, and just asking them, can we talk for 30 minutes? Like, I am where you were 5 years ago. I want to be where you are right now. Can we talk about your experience? Can we see, do you have any nuggets of wisdom for me? And it was actually very, very interesting to see, like, I didn't hear a single no. We maybe had to acknowledge a little bit of like scheduling and like, you know, I have kids, I have work, I have this, like, how do we make time for each other? But those conversations really helped me figure out, from the point of view of employers, which was my desired target audience at the time, what they wanted and what they needed from candidates, and how to market myself and what I already had, the skills and talents I already brought to the table, in a way that defined me and made it easier for them to realize that I was the candidate they wanted. So through that, I was very lucky to get an internship. So I managed to graduate, spoiler alert. But it was very, very eye-opening to just make that extra step, to have that initial conversation. And the really easy trick is, A, the worst thing people can say is no, and no hard feelings there. We're all busy. But in the B, the second thing is, when that conversation happens, people love talking about themselves. They will share every nugget of wisdom and things that they learned along the street, because they probably hope that someone was there to have that conversation with them before. So that I built some of the best mentorships that I could get, just cold calling and sliding into people's DMs, which doesn't sound that great when we say like that, but it does.
In a professional way.
In a professional way. And on the other side, so where I was interacting more one-on-one, Susie was just doing what is scary for me, which is just throwing content out for all the internet to see.
And this is why we complement each other. But yeah, so here's the space where you take out your pen and paper and we share our knowledge with all of you. So how do you get on social media? How do you start creating content and look professional? First tip I will give out is reading the news of your industry every day. in order to create content that resonates with your target audience, you need to know what's happening. You need to subscribe to your area of expertise and set it up in a way that you understand it, so you understand the context behind what is happening, and you can separate that and explain it to your audience in the now.
Absolutely. And along the same lines, just as you need to be aware of what's going on very regularly and frequently, the other idea is to create content regularly, whether you write, you record a podcast, you put out TikToks or Reels or LinkedIn articles or white papers, what have you, whatever medium serves you best, you need to be regular about it, which doesn't mean necessarily, 3 Reels and 2 lives a week, because we also have jobs and we would like to have personal lives beyond that. But find what schedule works for you and is sustainable, and hold yourself accountable to it. That was another one of my big roadblocks. I'm like, okay, I have an idea for one post, but where do I go from there? Because then the next week I feel the pressure to post again. And that was one of my biggest holdups before we started a podcast and started thinking like, okay, given that we all still need to graduate, still need to keep an internship, still find a job, how do we make this sustainable for ourselves?
Yeah. And from there, well, it goes back and forth. It all happens simultaneously.
Yes.
But you need to study who your audience will be. In my case, it was the IO community. I wasn't going for just one business or organization in particular. I was going for all because even IO is really small. But I just wanted to have those connections at first. So a quality of a successful content creator is knowing your audience inside and out. What do they want to see? What are you not giving them? What problems are there in your industry? And how are you going to be the person that solves them?
And in doing that, it goes to establishing your voice. And as Susie said, like, we are both consumers and producers of content. So we need to find our voice, find where we fit into the field. For example, if there had already been 6 international student podcasts that happen to be graduate students in the social sciences, we may have had to position ourselves differently. But the combination of our lived experiences and our academic field is the angle that made us unique when we started. Mm-hmm. At the same time, it's a collaboration and a competition with other creators in your same range. And I think it's beneficial to start seeing it as a collaboration early on and see where we can support each other. So when we take it to the point of view of like the recent graduate or the student who wants to start positioning themselves, we are in a sense competing with the millions of other class of 2021 graduates in the United States, or with the other people that graduated with the same degree, with your cohort. But again, what I bring to the table is something that no one else can. How can that complement what you bring to the table? And so we have also kept a very strict audit of other content creators in IO psychology and how to possibly uplift each other through that.
And with that comes being confident and giving yourself leeway to, I don't know everything, but someone else has posted about that. What I can bring to the table is bringing my voice to that post, to that question, giving your thoughts, giving out your opinions on other people's content. It's kind of how you start networking nowadays on social media. So appreciating other authors will give you that bonus of networking and exposing yourself to maybe other people that you wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise.
Absolutely. So far we've covered like understanding your audience, understanding other creators in your field or where you fit. in that competitor, collaborator realm. And again, posting consistently, we would be bold-faced lying if we said we haven't made a mistake or we haven't posted something and then really quickly take it down and realize that we had to fix a typo or we had to like change our angle. We recorded a whole special about a documentary, and then as soon as the episode went live, official statements started coming in that we didn't have the space to acknowledge in the episode itself. So allow yourself the freedom to fail is what I'm going with. And in order to do that, you're going to have to understand, getting a little bit more technical, your KPIs, so your key performance indicators.
Mhm.
Again, we don't have to get super technical. We don't have to have like Excel sheets over Excel sheets of just constantly monitoring what's coming out. But as you start putting content out, you're going to want to know what is working and what is not. Where do my efforts perform better? For us, Susie is the Instagram whiz and has coached me through the algorithm and when to post so that most people see our episodes coming out. For if you're going to post on LinkedIn, do you have a friend that can go and like it real quick so that it starts being seen in their network and other people can engage with it? And then if you realize one platform is not working for you over the other, then that's totally fine. We had a short stint with YouTube. It wasn't really serving our purpose in that moment, so we closed it. So definitely follow what leads are more productive for you and focus your resources there.
Exactly. And just how Claudia explained, you will be seen in other circles. That networking forces you to listen to other people's ideas and take into consideration alongside your own. So last takeaway for me is getting in the habit of networking, seizing those opportunities just like this one, being in more alumni panels, group chats. LinkedIn has now groups, like industry groups that you can become part of. And even just starting with your colleagues. If you're in their mouth, they'll be in your mouth, and you'll just start a community right there. Claudia?
Did we lose Claudia?
I think we lost Claudia.
She'll be back. Oh, here she's coming back on. There was a question that came in. And it's a little off topic of here, but while we break for a minute, what was your research in IO about?
Mine was on organizational trauma during mergers and acquisitions of workplaces.
And what did you find?
Organizational trauma is so very big. It was mostly a lot of communication, trust, and creating high-performing teams so that when the organizational trauma struck in those communities, you still have people on the inside with whom you could rely on to go through the psychological safety and feel safe in the new workplace.
Great. And I think, Claudia, you back?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry, everyone.
Got it.
My Wi-Fi decided I was talking too much.
Wi-Fi.
Right. But jumping back in, sorry, Susie, I missed the end of your point, but one of my other takeouts that I think is a really good reminder is something that my parents actually taught me, that, you know, the saying, don't shoot the messenger. No one should shoot the messenger, but also no one likes the messenger that only brings up the problem. That's why people want to shoot them. But what I'm getting at with that is my mnemonic for saying whenever we bring up a topic or an issue, and through the podcast we brought up a few contentious areas for growth, either in our field, in how we address international students in academia, in how we address most minorities in academia, is once you name the problem, you are responsible for it. So also offering some solutions or offering a perspective that brings the conversation forward. Because it's one thing to point at a hole and say like, well, there's a hole in research, someone should do something about it, and actually addressing it. So especially when we're trying to build an audience, they may already be aware of something about the point that we are bringing. As I said, we are not reinventing wheels, but we are trying to look at them from a different perspective. And audiences will come to satisfy a specific need. So our different perspectives, again, are what we contribute to the solution.
And our last but not least takeaway is question everything. The head of marketing at Google once was quoted saying, "You need to be curious to identify problems worth solving." And we took that to heart. We love playing devil's advocate and taking the contrary views on pieces of content that have been already there, questioning why the author thinks that way and what happened in our industry to trigger those viewpoints. It's an easy way to think more critically, but also to share your voice. And we found that critical thinkers make great content creators. Go figure.
And it's also like a fun way to address things. Like if you want to really understand something, at least in my experience, it's always funny in content creation to look at the comments that are just completely shredding and taking content apart. Because a lot of it may be unnecessary, or like some comment section may be more toxic than others, but there might be some nugget of truth that again pushes the conversation forward, if constructive. So this is most of what we had for you guys before we move into addressing some of the questions in the chat. Ultimately, I started as a skeptic. I thought branding, it's posturing. I'm not an influencer. I don't want to create a whole persona online. Like that sounds like another job. But achieving brand awareness in a genuine way and brand visibility, whether it is for yourself personally or eventually for the companies that you will work in and represent, is an investment in career. As we said in the beginning, you may have the greatest, smartest, most beautiful things in sliced bread, but if no one knows you have that, who is it serving? It's not advancing you or serving the greater public, whether that be in your field or your communities. So to be consistent in getting you out in the marketplace and being in the places that you know your audience is to also advance careers much, much quicker and making it a lot easier, especially now that we are all just interfacing with screens all day. Yeah. Let's see, do we have any questions in the chat already? I just rejoined, so if anyone asked before my little internet snafu, I'm sorry, I cannot see your question anymore.
Well, someone asked me what my research was about. If you want to go through that, what was your practicum on, Claudia?
So for me, my family has worked in healthcare for a couple generations. And so being from Italy when the pandemic started, but being here was very scary. And that was around the time I was picking my topic. So I definitely knew I wanted to work on a topic related to healthcare and how to support them through this emergency. At the same time, my internship had just started reevaluating our competencies and the skill sets that workers needed. So I try to combine how the emergency response skills that EMT and first responder teams have could apply to other industries outside of the healthcare realm, especially in the middle of a pandemic, or just when employers and employees may have health issues that interfere with work. And Susie, you touched on something equally important with the pandemic.
Yes, organizational trauma during mergers and acquisitions, but I already went into that. You were just not on the call for that.
I'm sorry.
Does anyone have questions on, or sorry, Jessica?
There's a question that came in about how long does it take to build an audience, and like what main factors should be considered. And everybody feel free to, we have some time here, so feel free to unmute, or if you have any comments or want to have a conversation.
Susie, do you want to take this one?
Building an audience takes as much time as you want to put into it. 1 year into WorkPsych, I am at about 1,000 followers, more than 1,000 followers. But 10 months into BCI, we are at 35 countries. However you want to measure your audience, but it really does take different approaches. On LinkedIn, you should post daily. On podcasts, you can do them once a week, once a month, and have a different outcome.
Absolutely. I would add that it also, like, at first is going to be discouraging. I know when I first opened the BCI Instagram account, I was literally myself, Susana following it, my mom, and then a couple of accounts that we managed for other organizations. So it's definitely not overnight. And it can be discouraging, at least speaking from personal experience, when you start something. And for me, it was like, I sent it to my friends, I talked about it to my friends, and some of my friends still don't follow my podcast. But it's also because you learn how to be independent and like to use your audience as an instrument of like your reach, and not necessarily rely on, okay, every time a like comes in, every time an interaction comes in. It is going to build over time, and sometimes building it slower just means that it's more and more focused. So the broader your topic is, the more content you will find. It's not a surprise that on Instagram, cat pictures are the highest engagement after like the Jenner family or the Kardashian family. At the same time, if you're very, very niche, interacting with 15 people, 20 people will carry a lot more value than if you were just sharing sourdough recipes or banana bread recipes. So as good IOs, the answer unfortunately is it depends.
Yes, I was thinking about this question too, and Brent posed it, right? If you're conversing about controversial topics, or may feel one way about a certain topic, and in your organization or your workplace feels differently about it, what advice do you have about, or what thresholds would you say you use to like post controversial topics so that it doesn't come back to you with your professional workplace? Or like, how do you mitigate that?
Okay, that's a very valid, very, very good thing to think about, especially as we see more and more controversy and topics that people feel really strongly about, excuse me. I think for us, we definitely have conversations beforehand, especially for the podcast, on what are relative comfort zones in going into different topics. And so we act as sounding boards for each other. When we made an episode on a topic I wasn't particularly familiar with, I had to say that I haven't done my research, I haven't done my homework. So I will be very careful before I make a statement on anything. I think on the other hand, the episode that I mentioned on the documentary, and then the information changed literally as we were going public with the episode, is to be ready to admit that we are subject matter experts in our fields, but we are not Google. We are not professional journalists, so we will learn along the way. And it's to have the humility to say, I may have put my foot in my mouth, or I may have spoken out of good intentions, but as the situation changes, I'm also evolving. And it's to have the humility to realize when we need to do that.
Absolutely. Part of us being partners is knowing that whatever Claudia says will reflect on me, and whatever I say will reflect on Claudia, because we have a podcast together. So of course we need to be in constant communication of, do we want to post this? Are we both comfortable with this being our brand, being our image? Something that has come up with WorkPsych is people in my network asking me or telling me that something I'm posting could be seen as controversial. And my response, aside from knowing that things change all the time, and I might have to post one day saying, sorry, new information has developed and now I stand like this, or now I know this, is also something that we mentioned previously. We like to stand with stuff that where our values, words, we like our personal values align with our workplace. Mm-hmm. And so we wouldn't feel comfortable at a workplace where what we are saying could be seen as controversial, right? Just yesterday, we posted about International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia. That's very important to us. We want to speak up on that. And if that was a problem with our organizations, we would have a problem working for them as much as they would have a problem with us posting about it.
Absolutely. And I think for us, the other thing that informs us in this respect is having both been international students, and that impacts our ability to work for different employers. We've definitely both had this conversation about how we felt the pressure to fit into the organization that employs us, whether it be for an internship or for a longer term, because you need that employment to graduate, right? And everyone needs employment just to pay the bills and keep the lights on. So especially at the early stages of our career, it is scary to say, well, it's my way or the highway, because these are the values I believe in, when we have that pressure to start our career. At the same time, taking that stance, at least in our case with the podcast and in my personal career, has opened more doors than it closed. I've had recruiters just hang up on me because I was like, well, I'm an international student. I may need sponsorship at some point, so we need to have that conversation. Or, hey, your company did not say anything last year, or did not say anything this year about civil rights. What's up with that? And if they don't have an answer there, then you also know that that might not be the right fit for you. But again, I don't think I've missed those places until I mention them right now. And taking those stances has attracted much better opportunities into my life. It's definitely a scary step to take, though.
Yeah. Here's another question. Scott says, when he connects with somebody, say on LinkedIn or on other platforms, maybe he feels like it's disingenuous that you want to connect because you might not be in the industry yet. Have you ever felt that way? Maybe you were sharing earlier about those informal interviews,
Mm-hmm.
And what things have you done to make it less challenging to kind of get into a space maybe you're not in already?
Okay, so the first part, like having felt phony or disingenuous, oh my God, absolutely. Anyone who says networking comes natural, I am a little bit skeptical of, no offense. But some very good advice that I received on that, which was actually during one of the informational interviews. I had an interview with an alum who is a very religious person. And so they framed it for me as a matter of like, what can I offer to you, rather than coming from a place of asking. And again, it feels as a recent graduate, as a student, like, okay, what do I have to offer? But we actually do. We have a fresh perspective. We are fresher on our classes and our theories than maybe someone who's been in industry 5, 10, 15 years, unless they've done a lot of work to keep up to date. And we give them an opportunity to mentor. So I always like to look at it as like, what can I bring to your table? And how can I contribute to what you want to do? Instead of looking at like, well, I'm a recent graduate. Can you give me connections? Can you give me a job? Do you have an internship for me? Do you have someone you can introduce me to? And just trying to see people not as opportunities, but as someone to genuinely have a human connection with.
Mhm. Doing your research, how can you complement them? Personally on LinkedIn, when I get messages from people just wanting to connect, of course I accept them, but I take a harder interest in people that have gone into my profile, have commented on stuff that I've been part of, that I'm doing currently, and I take that and do it myself. If I want to start a connection with someone, I go in, I look up their profiles. Where do we have a common ground that I can bring up, so that later on that coffee or Zoom chat isn't as standoffish.
I was just like, okay, what is it that you want from me exactly? I found that for example, going back to LinkedIn, the requests that I receive that I prefer, or that at least stay in my mind a little bit longer, are those that say like, well, I saw that we both went to Randolph-Macon College as undergrads. I was like, okay, a lot of people do that. But we were both in the psychology department. Do you know Professor so-and-so? I saw your poster from your undergrad on the wall. Can we talk about that? Like, mostly just keeping the courtesy of like not wasting people's time. It goes back to as simple as that. If you want to talk to me, why is that? What do you want to talk about? Because there's so many different options. And likewise, when we reach out to someone, it's not just like, please free up 2 hours of your calendar to tell me the story of your life and all your deep-seated secrets. It's more like, well, I saw that you had this internship. Can you tell me about your experience there? How did that move into your next steps in life? And so you start from something very specific, so the other person has the opportunity to say, yes, I do want to share about that, or no, sorry, not this time, without doing all the tippy-top dance around each other.
And to you both, you know, this could be a lot to manage, right? Like, you not only are managing yourself daily, right, but you're keeping up these profiles, these personas. You know, how do you know it's all worth it, right? You're putting all this energy into these spaces, and you're posting, and you have thoughts, but you know, what is it that brings it back to, like, is this beneficial for, you know, your personal professional development? Can you share a story about someone who said, oh yeah, I saw you here, and then that kind of flourished? I mean, I can say, you know, because I mean, I guess I reference the situation right now, right? I saw this that you were hosting this, that you do the bias check-in podcast, and I started looking into you, and I thought, you know, this is perfect for them to share about how far they've come. But you have any other examples like that?
Let's see, Susie, do you want to take this one? I can think of a couple, but I feel like I've been talking a lot.
Well, yeah, this being on SIOP, being asked to present at SIOP, came from our professors knowing that we had a podcast on international students, and there was a request for international students to speak at SIOP and give out their viewpoints and share their experiences. So we got asked to participate in that. Currently, our work, we found our manager, boss, CEO, found me through WorkPsych. we had those connections going. And whenever he posted about associate consultant positions, we basically messaged each other at the same time, like, you want an internship and I want to work for you. It's been wild to know how many people look into us and hear our voices and tune in every week. But it's also very exciting to know that there are people in Singapore, Liechtenstein, Germany, and Switzerland that would be happy to talk to us and about us to their employers.
Yeah, I was thinking of some of the same situations. We have another speaking engagement that one of our coworkers brought to us because we mentioned the podcast when we were going through onboarding and talking about what we like to do for fun. On the other end of the spectrum, I think one of the most satisfying conversations that came out from having the podcast, from being very open about what we stand for online and offline. We had our first fan interaction a couple of weeks ago with a person that neither of us had any personal connection whatsoever with, who was an international student from another graduate program, saying, well, my professor found out about this through another professor, through someone else. And this episode had a very solid impact on me and my perspective. And like, Susie can laugh at me all she wants, but when we first got that message, like, I got even emotional because it was just like, oh my gosh, my words do matter. And especially with the podcast format, it's just like, okay, well, we put it out there, and until we see the metrics on our platform, we don't really know how an episode has landed or how it's going to be received. So to hear from someone in a very similar experience, but completely unknown to us, yes, your words resonate, your words make perfect sense, I felt the same way, was probably the biggest satisfaction I've gotten out of this experience so far.
And at heart, we are psychologists, so we want to help people.
Yeah, maybe, and this kind of ties into that about how your words matter. So there was a question here that says, what are your thoughts on cyberbullying?
Zero tolerance, just straight up not
experience it, do not condone it, and yeah.
And that goes back in how it relates to us, that we are very careful and intentional, even when we strongly disagree with someone and we have opinions, we're humans, to how do we phrase this, right? Because it's very, very easy to hide behind a keyboard. It's very easy to hide behind a microphone when the other person doesn't have a chance to respond. And so even when we disagree with someone or we stand for completely different values, to be very, very mindful of, I'm attacking your ideas, not you as a person, and to hold people accountable to the words that they use around us as well.
Absolutely.
Yes, that's powerful. Well, I want to say thank you to the both of you for sharing so much wisdom with us today, and sharing your experience of how to leverage social channels and profiles and social media for professional and personal development. I mean, I think it's wonderful that you kind of broke down, right, like how it all started. What have you learned along the way? What do you suggest? So that as people are leaving this space today and thinking about their social presence and their personas online, what steps they can take to create more visibility for themselves. So thank you so much for that. And I want to best wishes to you all for the things you're working on, all your projects and new employment and all of that. Says thank you. Your advice was insightful. Keep up the good work.
Thank you for the feedback.
I know on the background of your slides, right, you have some ways to connect with you. I'll also be sharing out your links with post-event survey. So please connect with them and us at Roosevelt with the Young Professionals Association. We will have opportunities for leadership, for content creation. We have a meet and greet with the new co-chairs on May 28th. So you are all welcome to be a part of that conversation as we continue to curate content for our recent grads. So thank you very much to everybody. I wish you a wonderful rest of your day, and go Lakers. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.